I have covered state processions at Keldrath Palace for 11 years, and in all that time, I have never seen a guard step off his post. Not once. Not when a tourist lunged at the line for a photograph. Not when a drunk knocked over the rope barrier on Founder's Day and stumbled to within arm's reach of the formation. Not when a summer thunderstorm turned the East Forecourt into a shallow river and the crowd pressed under every awning they could find. The Keldrath household guard does not move. That is the first thing every journalist covering the palace learns, and after a few seasons you stop finding it remarkable. It becomes furniture. The red tunics and the tall bearskins are part of the backdrop, like the gilded railings and the pale stone of the East Wing. Impressive the first time, invisible the 10th. I was there to cover the Autumn Passage procession, which runs from the inner gate to the ceremonial arch on the far side of the forecourt. It happens every year. The household cavalry leads, then the state carriages, then the household guard in double file on either flank. For a journalist, it means 2 hours of positioning, 40 minutes of pageantry, and a dispatch filed before 4 in the afternoon. I had done it 9 times. I knew where to stand. I was standing left of center, between the second rope barrier and the ornamental hedge, when I noticed him. He was at the edge of the forecourt, just inside the public enclosure, pressed against the stone balustrade that separates the observation area from the marching lane. The crowd around him was 3 deep, most of them holding phones at arm's length, angled toward the approaching cavalry. Nobody was looking at him. He was small. I put him at 7 or 8 years old, and he was alone. Not the alone of a child who has wandered 2 steps from a parent, the alone of a child who has no idea where safety is. He was gripping the top of the balustrade with both hands, white-knuckled, and his eyes were not on the procession at all. They were on the guard posted 10 feet to his left at the east gate. I noticed the guard because of the boy, and then I could not look away from either of them. Sergeant Aldrin Voss, I learned his name afterward, had been posted at the east gate for the Autumn Passage procession for the past 6 years running. I had filmed him before without registering him as an individual. What I remembered, reviewing my own footage later, was a shape: the red wool tunic, the brass buttons catching the midday sun, the tall black bearskin centered precisely, the white gloves resting along the seam of his trousers, the rifle held at the exact angle the manual specifies. He was not remarkable because he was so completely what a Keldrath guardsman was supposed to be. He was the ideal made flesh, and ideals do not have faces. He had a face that afternoon. The household cavalry came through the inner gate at a walk, 16 horses in precise pairs, their shoes ringing on the cobblestones in a rhythm that the crowd felt before they heard it. The procession always produces a sound like that, a deep, even percussion that you register in your chest before your ears catch up. The crowd leaned forward. Phones went up. The light was good, autumn gold and flat, the kind that makes every photograph look considered. The boy did not look at the horses. He was watching Voss, watching the way a drowning person watches a fixed point on the shore, not with admiration, not with the ordinary fascination of a child at a parade, but with a focused, desperate attention that had nothing to do with the ceremony. He was trying to decide something. I could see it from 20 feet away. Whatever he was deciding was costing him a great deal. The cavalry passed. The state carriages followed, 2 of them dark lacquered wood and brass fittings, the household crest on the door panels. The crowd noise rose with them, a collective intake followed by murmurs and the faint sound of recorded video. I was doing my job, logging the sequence, but I kept glancing left. The boy had not moved. His knuckles were still white on the balustrade. His eyes were still on Voss. And then, and this is the thing I have tried to describe accurately every time I have told this story, and I am not sure I have ever done it justice, Voss looked at him. Not a glance, not a flicker. A guardsman does not let his gaze travel. His eyes are forward and they stay forward. But somewhere in the mechanics of a man who has trained himself to read his post without appearing to read it, Voss found the boy. Their eyes met for perhaps 2 seconds. The procession continued. The boy's grip on the balustrade did not loosen. Something crossed Voss's face. It was small and it was fast, and if I had not been watching I would have missed it entirely. The very slight adjustment of a man who has just made a calculation and arrived at a number he did not expect. He held his post. The household guard flanking units came through the inner gate in double file, 8 men on each side, moving at the ceremonial pace, exactly 28 inches to the step. The east gate detail, of which Voss was the anchor, would join the formation as the files passed his position. It was a choreography I had watched 9 times. I knew the beat. I was waiting for him to fold into the line. The lead file reached his position. Voss did not fold. He stepped left, a single, deliberate step, off the marked post, out of the formation gap, and moved to the balustrade. The file adjusted around him without breaking pace, 2 men closing the interval with the smoothness of long drill. In the crowd, nobody registered it. The camera phones were on the file. The man next to me was narrating quietly into his phone for someone watching remotely. I was the only person I know of who saw Voss cross those 10 feet. He came to the balustrade, and he crouched down so that he was at eye level with the boy. He did not touch him. He did not reach for him. He simply came down to his height and held still, the way you hold still for a frightened animal, and he said something. I was too far away to hear the words. What I could see was the manner, the complete absence of urgency in it, the lack of any motion that might startle or alarm. A man of considerable physical presence making himself small and safe. The boy stared at him. His grip on the balustrade slowly released. He said something back. Voss nodded once. Then Voss turned his head just slightly and caught the eye of his duty officer, a lieutenant standing back from the line at the edge of the forecourt, whose job is to monitor the gate detail during the procession. The communication between them was 4 seconds long, and consisted entirely of a look and a very small tilt of Voss's chin toward the public enclosure behind the boy. The lieutenant spoke into his radio. 2 palace security officers in plain clothes appeared from the archway on the north side of the forecourt within 90 seconds. I watched them move through the crowd with the practiced efficiency of people who know how to cross a space without causing a ripple. What they found in the public enclosure, and what the boy had been running from, or toward, in the only direction that felt safe to him, I will not write in detail, because the details are not mine to tell, and they are not the point of this story. The point is that they found it. The boy was taken to a warm room inside the east wing, and what needed to be dealt with was dealt with, and the people responsible for his welfare that day were identified and made to account for themselves through the proper channels. It was handled without spectacle. Voss had read the situation correctly, trusted the boy's face over the protocol, and set the right machinery in motion before the procession had passed the midpoint of the forecourt. He returned to his post. The tail of the formation was still moving through the arch at the far end. He rejoined the east gate position, adjusted his rifle to the correct angle, and was still before the last carriage had cleared the cobblestones. The crowd around me began to understand in pieces what they had just seen. It moved through the enclosure the way understanding usually does. One person says something to the person next to them, and a murmur starts, and then people who had been looking the wrong way were turning back and asking what happened, and the people who had seen it were trying to explain. Someone near the balustrade had filmed part of it on their phone, not the crouching, not the exchange, but Voss stepping off his post and the file adjusting around him. That was enough. The applause started near the balustrade and spread to the center of the enclosure and then out to the edges, and by the time it was full the procession was gone and the forecourt was just a wide pale stone square in the autumn sun with a handful of guardsmen at their posts. Voss did not turn. He did not acknowledge it. He stood the way he had stood before any of it happened. The red tunic, the bearskin, the white gloves, the rifle at the specified angle, eyes forward. I filed my dispatch at 3:30. The procession piece was 3 paragraphs. The rest of it took me considerably longer, because I kept stopping to think about what the word discipline actually means. I had always understood it as the absence of movement. The man who does not react, does not flinch, does not give you the satisfaction of a response. That was the definition the bearskin and the tunic and the lock-straight posture had always communicated to me. Discipline as refusal, discipline as a wall. What Voss showed me that afternoon was something older than that, and harder. Discipline is not the absence of judgment. It is the cultivation of judgment so precise, so practiced, so deeply owned, that when the moment comes, the one moment that matters, out of the 10,000 moments that do not, the right thing happens without hesitation and without noise. He stepped off his post because 15 years of standing it had taught him exactly when it was necessary to move. The protocol exists to protect what matters. When what matters walks up to the balustrade with white knuckles and terrified eyes, the protocol serves itself by giving way. He was back at his post before the crowd finished applauding. That, I think, is the whole of it.